Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to another episode of Destroying Doubts, where we address your questions about Islam.
Why hello my fellow apes, I hope you are well. One Path Network is a Muslim production studio based down under in Sydney, Australia, and in their show titled Destroying Doubts, they seek to
take your doubts and misconceptions about Islam, present them to the Sheikh, and hopefully have them destroyed.
And within the episode that I'm about to respond to, they claim that atheists received the lesson of their lives from a Muslim. Well, after many years of studying theology and philosophy, including Islamic scholars such as Al-Kindi, Al-Ghazali and Averroes, I, an atheist, am eager to heed this lesson. As always, the video I'm responding to is linked below should you wish to view it in its entirety, but here, for everyone's convenience, I'm going to focus on the core. But just before we get into it, I'm very excited to announce that Debunked is now available to Canada and Austria. Be sure to click the link below should you want a copy. And with that, let's get to it.
I have with us today Sheikh Harun Kanj. Assalamu alaikum, Sheikh.
Wa alaikum assalam, Brother Hisham.
Jazakallah khair for your time. Inshallah, today we're talking on the topic of does God exist?
Inshallah.
So we'll be addressing this comprehensively. To start off, Sheikh, on this question, where would we start? If someone's having this question, where should they start?
Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in.
The Sheikh begins by emphasising the importance of the question and the fact that other species don't seem capable of asking such questions.
This aspect of our nature, you don't really find it in other creatures upon this earth.
To which the host asks whether or not the Sheikh believes this is part of the purity and innocence that Muslims believe all humans are born with.
Would you, sorry, Sheikh, just on that, would you say that's part of our fitrah?
Of course, part of the fitrah that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created in man is that he has to understand the world around him. Yeah. Part of understanding this world around him is where did all of this come from?
Yes.
So it leads to that question automatically.
No.
In time, I will dedicate an entire video to Fitra, but for now I'll merely point out a simpler explanation as to why we ask existential questions. An explanation that's supported by overwhelming evidence. Evolution by natural selection. In many circumstances, organisms that understand their environment, that is, attain answers to questions both big and small, tend to have a higher chance of survival than organisms that don't, and this has been especially the case for hominids, who had to rapidly adapt to, and understand, varying environments as they left Africa. The difference, for instance, between knowing about crop cycles and not, really can mean life or death for the clan. Hence, over generations, the thinking ape has evolved to eventually understand and dominate the planet, and existential questions can be conceived as a byproduct of this adaptation. We not only ask how we can achieve a greater harvest, but also why are there harvests in the first place. But again, I'll expand upon this in the future, where I can lay down a bit more groundwork. To put it bluntly, the acceptance rate of evolution by Muslims differs greatly by country, and so ideally this explanation could do with a bit more attention. Anyhow, let's get back to the question of whether or not Allah exists.
Where would you start in answering this question, really? Mm-hmm. That's the important thing to mention. If you think about it, before you answer that question, does God exist? First of all, I have to ask myself, do I exist? Do I exist?
Okay, so if we were to ask the Sheikh how he knows that the chair he is sitting on exists, do you think he would respond by asking us to justify our own existence? Or do you think he'd immediately supply us with empirical evidence? The chair is solid, the legs are fixed, etc. What I'm driving at here is that when religious leaders have good answers, they provide them readily, but when they don't have good answers, they tend to deflect questions by forcing their interlocutor into the notoriously difficult realm of epistemology. This tends to result in the original question being sidestepped, since if one can't 100% prove that they exist, then what business, the reasoning goes, do they have in asking whether or not other things exist? But despite my strong suspicion here, I of course appreciate that the Sheikh could be simply emphasising the role that one's epistemology plays in approaching the question of existence, ontology. So let's see where he's going to take this.
Do I exist? It might seem like a silly question, but really there's people that have questioned this over the history of man. There were certain people that would doubt even the existence of themselves, or they would doubt the conclusions that they would come to, the understandings that they had of things. They would doubt everything.
Almost every major historical philosopher, including of course Islamic scholars, have considered questions about what we know and how we know it. That is, questions that pertain to the philosophical branch of epistemology. The quest to justify our knowledge, including knowledge of our own existence, is taken very seriously in the academy, and is saturated with notoriously difficult questions. Doubting one's own existence, and especially physical existence, is not silly. If one wants to build a house, they must have a solid foundation.
But really, if you want to know if you exist or not, very simply, all you have to do, is just stand in front of a mirror, give yourself 2 good slaps, and see if you feel any pain or not.
Well, René Descartes' cogito ergo sum, which is Latin for I think, therefore I am, allows us to establish that in the moment that thinking is occurring, and no, not necessarily that it's our own. But when it comes to justifying the existence of anything else, including our physical existence, this is far from an easy task. Now, it's a shame that the likes of Descartes, John Locke, and Bertrand Russell didn't consider the Sheikh's experiment of slapping themselves, right? No, of course they did, but they rightfully recognised that if we appeal to our physical pain, our physical existence, in order to prove that we physically exist, then we're begging the question. We're assuming the very thing we're trying to prove. We're assuming that we physically exist in order to prove that we physically exist. This is circular reasoning. It's fallacious.
If you're still doubtful, then, living here in this country, and in the West especially, stop paying your taxes and see what happens as a result. See when the ATR catches up with you and gives you the fun of your life, if you really exist or not.
The fear of having to pay a large bill is still a feeling, and further still, it's a fear of physical reprisal. Hence, the Sheikh is attempting to prove that he physically exists by appealing to physical phenomena. This is begging the question. But to contextualise this objection in perhaps a more obvious way, consider dreams. I don't know about you, but on occasion I feel pain in my dreams. Not only have I had nightmares in which I'm physically injured, but also psychologically injured. But if I were to appeal to those feelings in order to prove that the dream was real, I'd obviously be committing a fallacy, right? Well, the same is true when the Sheikh gets anxious about a potential fine. He can't prove that he physically exists by appealing to his physical experience.
And if you're still doubting it, then, go rob a bank and see the result of it. You very soon and very easily come to the conclusion that you do exist.
Reality,
Yeah.
Once again, the Sheikh is begging the question. His argument is equivalent to asserting that the repercussions received in a dream are proof that the dream is reality. Going back to Descartes, all we can say with certainty is that, in a given moment, thinking is happening, and that's it. Consequently, for every other belief, we have to admit of potentially being wrong. We can't know with certainty that we exist in the form that we experience, let alone that other things, including Allah, exist in the form, or let's face it, many contradictory forms, that Muslims claim to experience. Fortunately, however, pretty much everyone accepts the laws of logic and empirical evidence, and so just as we can appeal to these to justify our belief in, say, the Earth being a sphere, we can attempt to do the same for the existence of Allah.
So saying that I exist and my physical body is before me and it is complex and it's a work of design and art, there's also another aspect of me as a human, my mental aspect.
Alright, so I've got to pause here because the Sheikh is beginning to Turek trot. Remember, the question he's addressing is, does God exist?
Does God exist?
And as a response, he's asked a question of his own, that being whether we exist. And upon giving his answer to this question, which you'll recall is the fact that there are consequences to our actions, he's concluded that we are a product of intelligent design. That simply doesn't follow. That's a non sequitur. One can't ascertain from merely the fact that we exist, that we have or had a creator. The Sheikh has a lot more work to do here.
So saying that I exist and my physical body is before me and it is complex and it's a work of design and art, there's also another aspect of me as a human, my mental aspect. Once you start to read up on that and see what the scholars, the doctors and experts and scientists have said, it becomes even more complex. Mm-hmm. Consciousness, what is this conscious that we have? Very, very dark, very unknown. Delve a bit more deeper to the essence of man, which is the soul.
The Turek trotting is now in full canter. In less than 30 seconds, the Sheikh has put several arguments on the table. The first was William Paley's watchmaker argument.
And it's a work of design and art.
The second was a more specified watchmaker argument.
My mental aspect.
The third was an argument from consciousness.
Consciousness. What is this conscious that we have?
And the fourth was a substance dualism argument.
Delve a bit more deeper to the essence of man, which is the soul.
Indeed, the Sheikh has made a lot of claims in rapid succession, and so it's going to be interesting to see how he defends each. At this point, however, I will emphasise that all his talk about justifying our own existence seems very irrelevant.
Delve a bit more deeper to the essence of man, which is the soul. What is the soul? You're completely left, gobsmacked. Mm-hmm. That's why the scholars, they have a famous saying, they say, من عرف نفسه عرف ربه. The one who knows himself, that knowledge will lead him to know his Lord. No. Once you look at yourself, you reflect upon your creation, you find very easily that you are a work of God. You are a work of design.
The Sheikh is reasserting the watchmaker analogy. He's claiming that when we reflect upon our creation,
you reflect upon your creation,
it's very easy for us to identify that we are a product of intelligent design.
You are a work of God.
But once again, he can't just assume that we're a creation. He needs to demonstrate it. And so far, he's merely appealed to complexity, which has long been refuted as necessitating intelligent design. Other than this, Kant has heavily relied on one, our intuition, which as we all know is erroneous. For instance, our intuition tells us that this image is moving, but it's not. If you don't believe me, pause the video. Or take a pick from many of the most successful scientific theories, which frequently and with great relish mock our intuition. And two, he's relying on us being ignorant of evolution by natural selection, since natural selection explains precisely how complexity emerges naturally, without intelligent guidance. As alluded to earlier, the acceptance rate of evolution among Muslims varies significantly by country. But remember, the Sheikh is not addressing Muslims here, he's addressing atheists. And atheists, like the vast majority of scientists, philosophers and scholars, typically accept evolution. Thus, and with all due respect, the only lesson to be learnt here is that the Sheikh is a few centuries behind in terms of scientific knowledge.
You know, like the Arab man of old said, he has a famous saying, that's mentioned in the books. They say, البعرة تدل على البعير والأثر يدل على المسير ليل داج ونهار ساج وسماء ذات أبراج وأرض ذات فجاج وبحار ذات أمواج أفلا تدل على الصانع الخبير. Beautiful, precise, simple words from an Arab Bedouin that didn't have much knowledge, but he had understanding. He said, if you look at it, once you come across the droppings of an animal, you realize that there must have been an animal that passed through this place.
The watchmaker argument is typically every watch requires a watchmaker, but here we have every feces requires a feces maker. Alright, so the question is, how do we know that the universe is a feces? More accurately, how do we know that the universe is a product of intelligent design? You see, as David Hume pointed out long before Darwin's voyage, the reason we believe that watches require a watchmaker is because we know of no instance in which a watch has emerged in any other way. However, the opposite is true of life. We have no examples whatsoever of an intelligent being creating life, and we have countless examples of life emerging naturally through reproduction, which is confined by natural selection. What, then, the Sheikh needs to prove, or at the very least provide a coherent argument for, is how we can be certain that the universe entails a universe maker. He can't just assume it.
When you see footsteps, that means automatically that someone's walked through here.
Again, please demonstrate that the universe is a footprint. It's not enough to merely claim it.
If that is the case, then when you see the alternation of day and night, when you see the heavens filled with all the stars, millions and trillions of stars, when you see the earth with all of its rivers and paths, when you see the ocean with all of its waves, doesn't all of this automatically lead you to believe that there is a Sani', there is a creator who is all-knowing that brought all of this into existence? Mm-hmm. So similarly, after reflecting upon yourself, upon the creation of Allah, you come to the conclusion that there is something or someone that brought this into existence.
The Sheikh's appeal to our intuition here is all he's giving, and further still, he's only referencing that which is pleasing to our senses. But for every beautiful sight, there's a dozen horrendous.
If that is the case, then when you see the alternation of day and night,
and then you see the bushfires burning thousands of sentient creatures alive,
when you see the heavens filled with all the stars, millions and trillions of stars,
when you see children die from cancer and birth defects,
when you see the earth with all of its rivers and paths,
when you see parasites whose very life cycle necessitates blinding people,
when you see the ocean with all of its waves,
and the tidal waves that crush Muslims in their mosques. You see, the argument from beauty, Kanj, only works if your eyes are shut. The amount of natural suffering in this world, the fact that predators are forced to brutally rip apart their prey in order to survive, is enough to seriously doubt the existence of an all-powerful, all-loving God. And while we're admiring our physiology, let's take a moment to consider just one anomaly, the left recurrent laryngeal nerve. Put simply, this nerve runs from the brain to the voice box, which should be a distance of just a few inches. but instead it descends down from the brain into the chest, loops around a main artery, and then goes back up into the voice box, which in the giraffe results in a 15-foot detour. But funny enough, in animals without a neck, such as fish, the most efficient route for this nerve happens to be by navigating around the artery in the chest. Hence, if mammals evolved from fish-like ancestors, which an overwhelming amount of evidence screams, then we can easily explain why this absurd design exists. And remember, evolution is compatible with theism. Accepting it comes with difficult theological questions, for sure, but denying it just keeps you in the Dark Age. Sheikh Kanj is far from done. For instance, he goes on to misrepresent the Big Bang Theory,
Who brought the Big Bang into existence?
confidently reject infinite causation,
Cause and effect. But who caused that cause to begin with?
and commit an age-old black and white fallacy.
Either all of this came out of nothing, or someone or something brought it into existence.
Now, rest assured that I'll respond to all of this and more soon, and if this is something that you'd like to see, then please do consider subscribing. Anyhow, as always, thank you kindly for the view, and an extra special thank you to my wonderful patrons and YouTube members, whom without content like this simply wouldn't exist.